Today, we're going to talk about how politics really works. Not in the halls of power, but on the ground for millions of people living on the edges of society. It's a story that plays out in the fascinating, messy spaces in between. So, I want you to picture this. You're standing on a bridge in the south of Calcutta. You can hear the city humming all around you. But what you see, well, that depends entirely on which direction you're facing. Because from this one single spot, you're looking at two completely different worlds. They exist right next to each other, but they're an absolute universe apart. It's a real-life paradox. I mean, the contrast is just staggering. You look ahead, you see shiny, modern Calcutta, high-rise apartments, a fancy shopping mall, corporate offices, but then you look straight down, and there, squeezed right up against the railway tracks, is a line of shanties. This is an illegal settlement, and get this, it's been there for more than 50 years. How on earth is that possible? Well, this place, the Governmentality rail colony, has quite a backstory. It started out as this raw, almost frontier-like place, run by strongmen who were kind of part landlord, part protector. But then, in the 1980s, something totally changed. A new leader emerged, a schoolteacher named Anadi Bera, and he helped them get organized. They formed an association, and that was a complete game changer. And that brings us right to the heart of the puzzle. These people are, technically, squatters on public land. Their homes are illegal. And yet, they've managed to get legal electricity, city water, public toilets, even government-run schools for their kids. How? How does that happen? The answer lies in this idea that might be new for a lot of us. It's not what we typically think of as civil society. You know, the world of laws and formal rights. Nope. This is something else entirely. Okay, so here's the key difference. We all know civil society, right? It's for proper citizens, and it's governed by the letter of the law. But political society, that's the world where marginalized people live. It's not governed by strict law. It's all about negotiation. It operates in this gray area, a sort of paralegal space, where you make claims based on what's morally right, not what's legally written down. So here it is, the big idea. Political society is that practical, messy, and often totally unofficial space where people who are technically breaking the law can actually bargain with the state just to survive. This is the key that unlocks the whole mystery of that rail colony. So how'd they pull it off? Let's break down their playbook. First, they didn't just form some committee. They built this powerful identity for themselves as a single family. Then they used that identity to make moral claims. They weren't just squatters, they were refugees, they were the landless poor, categories the government is supposed to help. And that gave them the power they needed to start negotiating. But, and this is a big but, playing this game in political society is a high-stakes deal. Winning is never guaranteed, and what you win today, well, you could easily lose it all tomorrow. This is so important to understand. The whole thing is incredibly fragile. The political balance is always shifting. A rule that gets bent for you one day can be brutally enforced the next. It's a world of constant, nerve-wracking negotiation. Let's look at another example, the street vendors of Guriahat. For 30 years, these guys were the absolute masters of political society. They had illegally taken over sidewalks all over Calcutta, but through smart organization and negotiation, they built businesses, they supported their families, they were a success story. And then the political winds changed. The government suddenly wanted to clean up the city to attract foreign investment. And just like that, the vendors were in the way. In a single, swift, 2-week operation, everything they had built over 3 decades was just wiped out. Their success was temporary. Now, let's look at the flip side of that coin. What happens when a group fails to even get into this arena? Meet the bookbinders of Daftari Para. You've got thousands of workers in the same business, all crammed into this tiny neighborhood, all on the margins, but they never managed to make it work. And when you put them side by side, it's pretty clear why. See, unlike the rail colony squatters, the bookbinders never built that strong collective identity. Their attempts to organize just fizzled out. So they never engaged with the state. They never negotiated. The squatters got a foothold, but the bookbinders, they just stayed invisible and powerless. So, if negotiation is the name of the game, who's actually doing the negotiating? Who can speak the language of the government but also understand the people on the margins? This is where a really crucial figure comes into play, the mediator. Remember Anadi Bera, the master from the rail colony, the guy who got them all organized? He was a school teacher, and it turns out that is not a coincidence at all. Across rural West Bengal, school teachers became these incredibly important go-betweens. So what made them so good at this? Well, they had this unique mix of skills. They were educated, so they could understand all the bureaucratic jargon, but they often came from peasant families, so they got the people. They had a salary, which meant they weren't seen as having a stake in local fights over land. They were perfectly positioned to build trust and translate what the community needed into a language the government could understand. Of course, no story about politics is that simple. Over time, as these teachers got more powerful and their salaries went up, they started to become their own interest group. The very trust that made them so effective started to wear away, and the big question became, okay, who's going to be the next go-between? All right, let's zoom out. We have these illegal settlements, street vendors, mediators. What does all this tell us about democracy itself? Why does any of this really matter? And this, right here, is the heart of it. For massive populations who are shut out from formal, legal civil society, this is where democracy actually happens. It's messy, it's unofficial, it's definitely not by the book. But it's through these exact negotiations that they expand their freedoms and make real claims on the government. And you can actually see the results of this engagement in the numbers, which is kind of mind-blowing. Unlike in most big democracies, voter turnout in India is actually going up. And who's driving that trend? Well, the bar on the left is the urban middle class. But look at the one on the right. That's the poor and disadvantaged, the very same people who are most active in political society. They show up to vote because they see it makes a difference. There's this quote from our source material that just nails the whole idea. Real democracy, it argues, might not be the clean, orderly process we imagine. You can't lock it up in the sanitized fortress of civil society. It lives out in the messy, challenging world we've been talking about. And that leaves us with a pretty big thought to chew on. We tend to think of democracy as a set of laws and institutions. But maybe, just maybe, for most of the people on this planet, its true face is something much more dynamic, much more challenging, and a whole lot more human. What do you think?